Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all well. So in this video we are going to be reviewing the recently rebooted Roald Dahl classic novel movie The Witches. Now this movie was released all the way back in the 90s and this is a new take on it, and they've changed things enough for it to feel like a brand new experience while still retaining the core elements of the film to make it feel like a bit of a familiar experience as well. Now I do feel like they could have pushed certain scenes a lot more, especially the horror aspects of this film. I really do feel like they could have pushed those a lot more as well. But like I said, it is still an enjoyable experience with plenty of nostalgia in there so that you can really feel like certain scenes are a bit familiar, which I'm going to break down everything to do with the witches in this movie review. So in terms of the plot of this movie, firstly the film is set in the 1970s and it starts off by introducing us to a young boy character who doesn't have a name, interestingly, and he becomes an orphan and begins living with his grandmother. One day he goes to the store with his grandmother because he's trying to buy nails so that he can build a new house for his pet mouse, and while he's at the store he comes across a witch who tries to offer him candy. His grandmother then informs him that actually witches do exist and that they hate children. The movie then follows the standard movie beats for the witches in terms of they go to visit a grand hotel, which is also where the Grand High Witch is, along with all of her kind of witch minions, and there is a bit of a battle that ensues between the good guys and the evil guys, and certain characters are turned into mice. So from a cast and characters point of view, the new cast on the Witches reboot are actually really good. They play all of their characters really well, and they play them slightly differently to how they'd been portrayed in the original Witches film, which is really great. So let's go through them one by one. So first up, we have Octavia Spencer, who plays the new grandmother in this adaptation of the Witches reboot. Like I said before, she's a slightly different character to the one that was in the original, and this time you find out a lot more about this character's past. And she's a really stern lady when she needs to be. She's also really loving and caring when she needs to be. And she's also a bit of a potions master and a bit of a witch's expert when she needs to be as well. Next up we have Anne Hathaway, who plays this new iteration of the Grand High Witch. And similarly to Octavia Spencer, she plays the character really well. Like I said, she is a very different iteration to the Grand High Witch in the original. But this portrayal is really cool by the Anne Hathaway actress. Like I said right in the beginning, they could have pushed the horror aspects of this character a bit more. You know, she is a little bit horrific, but I do feel like she could have been even more so. But I know at the end of the day it is a bit of a kids movie, which is why they slayed that back a little bit. But you know, that being said, she does play the twisted and evil Grand High Witch character really well. Next up we have Jahzir Kadeem, who plays a character called Hero Boy in this movie, which is really interesting. They didn't give this character a name, whereas in the original, obviously the lead character was called Luke. But anyway, as far as Hero Boy is concerned, I thought his portrayal was fine. I really do think that they could have pushed this character a lot more, and also his performance could have been pushed a lot more as well, especially when the character was a human. But that being said, when this character gets transformed into a mouse, I feel like his voiceover was really cool and the character became really charismatic as well. Next up we have Stanley, who is the hotel manager in the really magnificent Grand Hotel, which is where all of the chaos takes place in this movie. Similarly, his character was fine, but I did really miss Rowan Atkinson playing this part. Next up we have Bruno, who is the character that goes on the adventures with Hero Boy. I thought he was a good character as well. I feel like this character was a little bit similar to a character in Matilda, but as far as this movie goes, he was really great. And then finally we have the character of Mary/Daisy, who also went on the adventures with Bruno and Hero Boy as well. And I feel as a collective, they were a really great group of heroes alongside Octavia Spencer's grandmother as well. So, you know, as you can tell, a very small cast in the Witches reboot, but they all played their parts really well. So from a visuals point of view, I thought Roald Dahl's The Witches reboot was actually really good. I thought all of the powers looked really great, all of the transformations looked really cool, and all of the mice characters looked really real as well. From a CGI point of view though, I do feel like some scenes were very apparently and very obviously CGI done. So for example, the mouths of the witches characters I thought looked really fake, and you could really tell when the CGI computer was working on the mouths. You could tell that they were trying to go for a bit of a Baraka vibe from the Mortal Kombat series, but I just feel like it didn't necessarily come across that well. And also, when the Grand High Witch was doing her arm stretching powers, I thought that looked a little bit fake as well. So those bits of CGI I felt were letting the film down. But otherwise, I thought the visuals were really, really impressive. I also thought that the reveal of what the witches really do look like, they could have amped that up a little bit more as well. I felt like they could have made that look a lot more scarier, especially when the Grand High Witch of the original Witches movie looked absolutely terrifying. And I do feel like they missed a bit of a trick, because I do feel like they could have made the witches in this iteration look absolutely ghastly and look absolutely terrifying. But that being said, overall, I feel like the visuals are really, really great in terms of really immersing you into the world of the witches. So in terms of comparisons, I did really enjoy the rebooted Roald Dahl's Witches movie. In terms of comparing it to the original film, I do feel like this one definitely has a modern facelift, which is really, really interesting. And I really like the fact that they gave the grandmother a really detailed backstory, which is really, really cool. Otherwise though, it does follow the same main story beats. I do feel like they could have made it a lot more suspenseful though. For example, when the witches are chasing after the characters of the boys and the mice, and also when the mice are trying to get the potion into the witch's soup. I feel like that scene could have been made a lot more intense, as it was a little bit tame, especially when you compare it to the original. So whilst I like this movie, I do feel like they could have pushed it a lot more in terms of making it a real standout compared to the original. So following on from the comparisons, now we're going to be talking about the detailed differences between this version and the previous version, and this is your spoiler warning, as we are going to go into more detail about the rebooted Witches movie. So the first big change that they did is making the Grand High Witch a lot less scarier than she was in the original, and I feel the reason that they did this is because in the original a lot of parents were complaining that the Grand High Witch was too scary, so I feel like this is probably the main reason that they did this. And also the next big change, like I said before, was giving the grandmother a lot more of a backstory, and you got to see that her friend got turned into a chicken, which is just absolutely terrifying. And on that note, I feel like the vibe and the setup of this movie does actually have a lot at stake, because certain characters are not able to be transformed back into humans, so I feel like as a setup it's actually pretty scary. The next big change that they did was giving the character no name. They just called him Hero Boy, whereas in the original the character was called Luke, so this is the big difference between the original and the rebooted version. The next one is to give it a clear time setting, so the rebooted version is clearly set in the 1970s, whereas the original version, you're not really sure when it's set. Bruno's father is also a bit of a different character as well. In the original, he was a very loose character that was hitting on some of the witches, whereas this time he is actually quite loyal to his wife. We then have the biggest change of all, which is that the characters stay as mice. The grandmother did try to use her potions to be able to turn the characters back into humans, but they weren't able to do this successfully, which actually does align a lot better to the book, which is where the characters stay as mice forever. So actually this is a lot more truer to the book roots. And I know a lot of audience members actually had this as a frustration for the original movie, because actually it didn't end in the same way as the classic novel did. The next big change was actually having the mice gang all staying together. Bruno's parents didn't want Bruno back as the mouse, so he stayed with the grandmother and with Hero Boy, and similarly the Mary character also stayed there, so that was really nice that they kind of all got to stay together. The next big change was actually having a really interesting confrontation with the Octavia Spencer grandmother character and the Anne Hathaway Grand High Witch character, and I really like the fact that these two characters actually had a bit of a duel, which was really, really interesting. The other change was that the big black book of all of the witches' names wasn't limited to just one country or one state. Actually, this black book had the name of witches all over the world. So after they're done with the Grand Hotel, Octavia Spencer's grandmother character and the mice are now trying to stop all of the witches across the world, which is really, really cool. And then the final change is that there's no good witch that turns all of the characters back into humans. Actually, all of the witches are really, really evil, which is another reason why all of the mice characters aren't being able to be turned back into humans, as there's no good witch to do this. So actually, there's quite a lot of changes between the original and the rebooted version, which really makes it feel like it's a brand new experience when you're watching this movie. So overall, I really enjoyed the rebooted version of Roald Dahl's The Witches movie. I thought the story was really, really great. I really liked all of the changes that they did. I thought the ending was really, really cool, really, really satisfying, and really nice to kind of see it a lot more aligned to the book. I thought the characters were great, the cast portrayals were good, the visuals could have been better, but for the most part, like I said before, it really does immerse you into the world. And then most of all, I thought it was a great bit of nostalgia, really throwing you all the way back to the book and to the previous version. And so for all of those reasons, I'm going to give Roald Dahl's The Witches reboot a solid 6.5 out of 10. I'd love to hear what you think, so please let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in my next video.